Hello and welcome to an unofficial ShiftedLands LARP Guide 105. In this video, we will cover the long-awaited upper pools, how they work, and how they interact with augments, paths, and elders. These upper pools have a lot to do with character progression, and are fundamentals that you will need to know if you intend to play ShiftedLands to its fullest extent. We will begin by looking back over the lower pools that you start out with. These are the 4 fundamental pools of the game, and each one has a respective upper pool. For sorcery, this is wizardry. For spirit, this is avatar. For knavery, this is rogue. And for weapon mastery, this is adept. Just like episode 102, where we split the conversation along the fighting pools and the magic pools, we will do so here as well. However, we must quickly cover an explanation of how to acquire upper pools with foci. As your character progresses and you earn build by attending events, you will be regularly spending build into one of your 4 lower pools. Once your lower pools have achieved a total of 50 build, you will have access to a special skill that revolves around that given pool, called a foci, or a focus. Once you have a focus for a given pool, you may then begin to learn and put build into developing an upper pool. Focuses, or foci, are unique to this process and interact with the lower pools in useful ways, while also being a gateway to the upper pools. Each focus can store unspent lower pools at the end of a game in a 1:5 ratio. For example, this means that at the end of the game, if you have 20 unspent sorcery, you can speak Focus 20 Sorcery and put it into your focus as 4 points of sorcery. Effectively, your focus becomes a battery of lower pool, allowing you to bring and use pool from previous events. The amount of pool you can store in your focus is equivalent to how large your lower pool is. So if you have 50 sorcery, you can store up to 50 sorcery inside of your focus. To spend resources from your foci, you must start your spellcasting or skill usage with the word focus. In the case of magic casting, this is called focus casting and is a very useful trick to cast spells faster. As when you are casting a focus spell, you do not have to use an incantation. This means, instead of saying out loud, with Eldritch Force, I grant repel weapon, you may instead say, focus grant repel weapon. In the case of knavery or weapon mastery skills, this increases the call's length. For example, instead of slay, you may call focus slay. In either case, this is a very useful tool and expands the depths of your character's resources that they can bring to bear in a given event. There are additional tricks and unique things to learn about with foci, so I recommend reading the rulebook for an in-depth understanding of these skills. However, with foci out of the way, we can finally begin the conversation about upper pools. Let's start with the fighting pools. These would be knavery and weapon mastery that turn into rogue and adept respectively. Unlike the lower pools, which had similar abilities with alternative effects, each of the upper pools here have more unique abilities and thus we cannot cover them at the same time. We will begin with Rogue. Rogue is the most defensive pool out of the 4 uppers and has one of the best skills in the LARP, Dodge. Dodge, at the cost of 10 Rogue, allows you to avoid any one attack delivered via packet, weapon, or body weaponry that strikes and targets you exclusively. This means that dodge interacts with almost all of the spells and skills found in the rulebook. To use a dodge, one must simply be struck by an attack and call dodge. Another unique skills rogues have access to is Strike for Paralyze, or Paralyze for short. This skill, at the cost of 2 rogue, allows the user to paralyze a victim from behind for 10 minutes. You must hit the victim from behind, as per knavery skills, and call Paralyze. An additional tool that the upper fighting pools both receive are defensive skills that can stop weapon blows and magic spells. In the case of Rogue, this is Auto Deflect and Magic Deflect. And as per the knavery deflects, these skills function regardless of where you were struck. Both of these skills are 5 rogue per use. On the offensive side of Rogue, rogues have access to a cool skill called Snake's Revenge. For 15 rogue, you may call out Snake's Revenge, and for combat duration, you may swing all of your attacks with Waylay. So if you had a sword and called out Snake's Revenge, every attack for the rest of the combat would be 2 Waylay. This skill also ignores the requirement that Waylay must be swung from behind the target, but does not drop the defensive requirements. which means in effect that a parry or similar skill from weapon mastery cannot defend against these attacks. Only knavery deflex or other rogue skills allows you to actively defend yourself from these attacks. There are more rogue skills to cover, and I recommend you take an in-depth look at knavery and rogue if you wish to learn more. We will now be moving on to adept. Adept is the most offensive pool out of the 4 uppers, and has one of the best attacks in the LARP, Vorpalslay. Vorpalslay, at the cost of 10 adept, functions similarly to regular slay. However, instead of immediately bringing the target to the death state, the skill instead immediately turns the target to dust. You heard that correctly. If you are struck by a Vorpalslay, you immediately drop all of your items and find a circle to begin the resurrection process. To use a Vorpalslay, one must simply strike the target's body and call Vorpalslay. Another unique skill that adepts have access to is Dance of the Adept, or Dance for short. This skill, at the cost of 10 adept, allows the user to swing an additional 50 damage to any of their weapon blows for combat duration. To initiate this skill, one must simply call Dance of the Adept, and may then begin to attack with an additional 50 damage to each of their strikes. An additional tool that the upper fighting pools both receive are defensive skills that can stop weapon blows and magic skills. In the case of Adept, this is Auto Parry and Magic Parry. Here and here. As per the Weapon Master parries, these skills only function for attacks that were landed from in front of you. Both of these skills are at 5 cost Adept to use. On the defensive side of Adept, there is Impenetrable Fortress, or Fortress for short. For 10 Adept, this skill allows the user to plant both of their feet, and for as long as they remain where they were standing, they may auto-parry attacks at will at no additional cost. There are more rules to Fortress, so if this interests you, I recommend reading this individual skill in detail. There are more Adept skills to cover, and I recommend you take an in-depth look at the Weapon Mastery and Adept page if you wish to learn more. We will now be moving on to the spellcasting pools. The upper pools of spellcasting are very different compared to the fighting pools. Where fighting pools get a unique set of direct skills to use, there are no additional spells that Avatar or Wizardry may use. Instead, they gain access to ritual casting within magic circles. Rituals are unique even when compared to spells, as the effects brought on by certain rituals are much longer lasting and have important utilities attached to them. Upon learning Wizardry or Avatar respectfully, you will gain a key card that allows you to identify common and rare components for their magical properties. These components are commonly dropped by monsters and creatures as loot, and are important not only to magic but also the crafting trades as well. Some of these components are required for individual ritual spells, but may also be tapped by users directly for magic pool replenishment. A rare component can be tapped for 5 points of a lower pool, or 1 point of an upper pool. A common component may only be tapped for a single point of lower pool. Unlike common spells, rituals are not guaranteed to succeed when performed, and if not properly prepared, have the chance to explosively backfire or wildly surge out of control. There is a lot more depth to casting rituals than covered here, and it is primarily a large part of the game and typically requires marshals to be present. Understand that while there might not be given abilities for those with upper magical pools, there is a diverse amount of roleplay and unique items that come from this part of the rulebook, and most of which is not actually in the rulebook. Ritual casting is by far the most diverse topic we could cover, and unfortunately it's just impossible to cover it all. One final note to make is that upper magical pools, such as Avatar and Wizardry, may be used to cast regular spells as if they were normal pools. This is fairly inefficient, but it is an important aspect to understand if you find yourself in trouble and out of the lower pools for spellcasting. With the 4 upper pools out of the way, we may now begin to talk about pathways and augments, true character progression and specialization. Racial augmentation, or augments, are a unique combination of 2 upper pools to achieve a racial homogenization that produces unique effects on a character's body, and gives them access to skills unattainable to most of the other progression pathways. Just like learning uppers, where you are required to 50 points of pool to unlock the Foci ability, augment abilities require 50 points of pool in 2 different upper pools. That means that your character must be relatively advanced and have a minimum of 200 points of build put into lower and upper pools, not counting racial abilities or skills. Depending on the two pools that your character specialized in, you will have become a specific augment, of which there are 6 different augments. These augments are Worm, which is Avatar and Wizardry, Reaver, which is Rogue and Adept, Dragon, which is Wizardry and Adept, Paladin, which is Avatar and Adept, Eldritch Trickster, which is Wizardry and Rogue, and Ascetic, which is Avatar and Rogue. Each of these augments has a unique flavor to their playstyle and roleplay within the LARP. In addition to this, when you augment, you also lose access to your racial elder skills of your given race, as the augmentation begins to alter your given race to some sort of hybrid between the given name of the augmentation and the race you chose. Thank you for watching this video. Unfortunately, we are not able to cover the additional character progression skills, which are called pathways or paths, in this video. However, we will be covering each augmentation in depth just as we did the common races within the rulebook. This means that we will now move again to an unscripted format which will be heavily opinionated and uncensored. My hope is that you'll gain some perspective of what these look like within the LARP and how they typically interact with roleplay. After we finish this multi-section series on augments, we'll move into a similar explanation of pathways. Thank you again for watching. This has been an unofficial ShiftedLands LARP Guide 105.